We're live? We're alive?
Yes.
This is live?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Radio Lab. Previously, we were discussing 1001 ways to wipe your butt without toilet paper. Yeah, it's a hot topic these days.
It really is a hot topic these
It really
days.
is a hot topic.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, we thought we'd start this episode of If We Do This Together with with our preferred way of doing the deed and cleaning yourself without toilet paper. And so to do this, I kind of turn to nature. I see what's happening around and how God made the animals, and so what we did is we rolled out a long rug down a hallway, and we sit down and pull ourselves along like the dogs do. And
Ew.
well, not you don't do that.
No, that's not how I do that.
It's just me. Well,
and good thing I know that. Now I know that we need to throw away some rugs.
That works for the dogs. No, we still have some toilet paper.
We do have toilet paper.
Yeah, so last time on If We Do This Together, we were discussing, left with the question for people to think about what they're afraid of. Let me re-angle this mic. And why that's important to know what you're afraid of. And everybody's afraid right now for a good reason, but it's good to really pinpoint what the center of that fear is, and these days, maybe it's pain. Maybe we're afraid of feeling, a certain pain, which is, it's understandable. We hear stories about how horrible this virus is and how painful it is, and maybe we're afraid of that. Or maybe we don't have fear of the virus at all. Maybe we're afraid of what happens if the economy shuts down. What is the fear? If the economy does shut down, well, then what is the fear behind that? Are we afraid that food will not come? So we're afraid of going hungry. Maybe we're afraid of losing loved ones. And if that's the case, then even then, keep digging. What is the fear that you have of losing loved ones? Is it that you never confronted that as a possibility to begin with? That we never thought, because life had been so good, and a lot of people don't have experience with losing really close loved ones. It's, Chrissy has so much experience with that. It breaks my heart. She's lost so many people in her life. Yes. But that's kind of rare. Some people, especially the younger people, they have no idea what it's going to be like to lose a close family member.
Yeah.
And, that fear of potential grief. Well, and, even then we got to dig down, and what is, this fear of grief, what is it? Oh, you hear my dog yodeling.
This is live, y'all, so there is a dog in the background.
There's nothing outside. She just barks at nothing, barking at the wind. Anyway, so to dig down into that fear, I know, I've cycled through all of those, and I think that they're all a likelihood. I think it's likely that I'm going to feel physical pain. I think it's likely that we're going to come across some unknown pain of what happens if we can't pull ourselves out of this, and society starts collapsing around us. I mean, it's terrifying. Chaos is outside the door, and that's what's terrifying. It's like when the lights are out and you just watched a scary movie, and you reach your hand inside of a dark bedroom to turn the light on. Just a few seconds, your hand is in that room. Your brain is cycling through every monster you've ever heard of. But then you turn the light on, and it's just a room.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're kind of here to help people go through, is not to not be afraid. That's foolish. To not be afraid is foolish. It's more about facing your fear and overcoming it, and to know that there's no situation that can happen that we as mankind have not tackled before and defeated. And I think that we've just forgotten that. And that's why I've wanted to come on here, like I said 2 weeks ago, to try to awaken in men the noble creatures that they were made to be, and how sad it is that they've been beaten down to the point that they don't know what they are. They don't know that they're sons of God. They're soldiers that tackle the chaos of existence and win. We've forgotten that, and we're scared. Men are scared little boys. That's kind of what's happened. And it's not so much we've come back down here to the South, and seeing good strong men is not as rare as when we were living in Portland. It was so hopeless up there. I feel so bad for what society has done to men in these areas, and they basically turned them into scared children. And to speak up, to think up, is almost illegal. And in some cases around the world, it is actually illegal to just speak the truth. And so, we want to do this because time's running out to speak the truth. And so we're going to do it while we can.
Yeah.
And so, going back to fear and why it's foolish to not have it, and how you can turn that foolishness into wisdom. Well, we're all familiar with a scripture in the Bible, and it's something like, if you could help me remember, it's something about the love of God is the beginning of wisdom. Was it what was it?
I think it's the fear of God.
The fear of God, that's right. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And wisdom is the only thing that's going to take us out of all this. It's not cramming our heads with knowledge. I mean, obviously, we got the smartest people on earth trying to fight this thing, and we might as well be in the Middle Ages. We are no closer to stopping or preventing than if we were 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
All that knowledge is useless. But wisdom can save us. Wisdom is washing your hands. Wisdom is God's natural law.
Yeah.
It's cleanliness. That's what we all know. Cleanliness is next to godliness. And we all know that what's happening, and I'm sure some people have heard it and have rolled their eyes at it, that this whole virus is a consequence of breaking God's law. We've heard that. Preachers have said that. But we kind of brush that off as like, well, that doesn't help us now. But it's like, if this all did come about through apparently eating live bat soup, which is a real thing.
Oh, geez.
That's one story of how it came out. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if this was created intentionally or accidentally. Both of it is the same root cause of flaunting God's law, of doing an unclean thing when we know we shouldn't. That even in the Old Testament times, people probably didn't really realize the reason for these rules. They just had them. In fact, they didn't realize the rules. That's why they get tired of it and then go back to worshiping Baal. And so, I want to try to wake men up to realize that they have wisdom if they can return to God, and that it's silver and gold. To wake up and return to God is better than silver and gold, obviously, because silver and gold is not going to do much for us pretty soon. So let's see. So fear, I guess I'm going to kind of talk about emotion, and why men, in particular, should change their idea of what emotion is.
Yeah, and even women. I mean, just not to, this morning we were talking. I was sharing with my husband a time that my stepdad, I saw him cry, and I made a comment, and I think I said something like, "I know men aren't supposed to cry." And my husband said, "No, men just aren't supposed to be emotional, but there's a difference, you
There's a time and
know.
a place. And,
Yeah.
we all know Jesus wept, but Jesus was not emotional.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's kind of that to me that was a light bulb. Even though I know it's not bad for men to cry, but I kind of also have been learning you don't want an emotional man either. You want a logical man.
Right.
But there is a difference with weeping. Like I think at some point we all will and probably should weep.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, well, it's fear is an emotion, and that's why it's so important to know what you're afraid of, because that will end up becoming like a god to you. You will fear this, you will fear one thing, and then your wisdom will be corrupted by that. All of your wisdom will be will be guided by this fear of yours. All your wisdom will be, if you're terrified of financial collapse, all your wisdom will be aimed towards doomsday prepping. You'll go buy an RV and then you'll run to the mountains, but that's not going to save you in the end.
yeah.
Or if you're afraid of pain, then you will do everything in your power. All your misguided wisdom, you'll turn yourself into living. You'll make yourself live in a bubble, and you'll cut off relations, and you'll actually end up weakening your immune system. In fact, living in fear of anything on earth in itself will weaken your immune system because it causes stress. And every doctor, everybody of authority, doctors, surgeons, clergy, priests, everybody knows that that stress is a far deadlier disease than this virus. And what's unfortunate is that because of a lack of proper wisdom, it's just doubling up. And so people are getting terrified, they're getting stressed out, so their immune system weakens, and they're even more susceptible to the thing they're afraid of to begin with. It's a perfect storm of misguidedness. And so I went back to the overcoming of emotion and how fear is an emotion that needs to be overcome. It needs to be re-guided to a fear of God. What's going on? Oh. Yeah, and so to not be emotional, the reason you don't want to do that is because if you're an emotional person, then they overtake you and you're subject to them. And I used to have this problem with anger, and I didn't control the anger. It was once I reached a certain point, whatever was going on, if I hit a certain level of stress or irritation or whatever, then it's like a demon of emotion overtook me, and I was no longer in control. And that's the problem with emotion. It's not that emotions in themselves are just evil or bad. It's that they're there to be overcome. And this happens with everything. If you're, what's it called, manic?
Mm-hmm.
Manic, you can be overtaken by a feeling of happiness.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's an emotion.
Yeah.
And you will make horrible life decisions, and you'll build yourself so high up because it's not you. You're no longer you if you're emotional. You can see emotions as little demons that have made a home in you. And depending on the situation, they take charge of the home. They're the head of that household at that moment. And so if you have emotions of fear, anxiety, happiness, grief, anger, whatever emotion it is, you have to overcome it, not bottle it, to overcome it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you control it. And then when you need anger, there's a season for anger. When you need grief, there's a time to grieve, but you control it. And that's what has really been lost in so many places, where, especially young men, for some reason, well, it's a satanic reason. They're told that it's strength to give in to emotion. It's this
Mm-hmm.
perversion. It's a confusion, which is what that word means. It's a turning upside down of right and wrong. And if you're a Christian, you know that when the time comes, right will be wrong and wrong will be right.
Mm-hmm.
Good will be thought of as evil, and evil will be worshipped as good. And we're seeing that left and right.
Oh yeah.
Everything's upside down. And so, thinking about your fear, find out what's at the base of it so that you can start to know yourself. And again, that's scriptural, to know thyself. It's you cannot be a man, you cannot be an individual, you cannot be a son or daughter of God if you do not know yourself, because then anything can control you.
Yeah. That's so true. We've experienced that. I mean, I think as humans we go on a journey, and it's at some point we all have that decision. Who are we going to follow? Truly follow?
Yeah.
Who are we truly going to worship?
Yeah, and it's a hard path to find. I know it took us a long time. We thought we were fearful of the right thing, and it turned out we weren't. It's essentially a lack of faith. If I had a lot of fear about how to protect my family, and that to me that meant to run and hide, essentially. That's in Portland, gosh,
yeah.
We can tell you stories of what's coming that's just so harrowing. It's coming. It's we've already seen things here in Lubbock that say that it's the devil's reach is, there's nowhere he can't get to, really.
Yeah.
And we've and then it took a while to realize that you can't run from it. It'll always find you, and that at some point you have to make a stand and fight back. And to remember that if you do, and you manage your fear, you overcome it, you realize that whatever situation comes out, if we stick together as men of God, that we can overcome it. There's no weapon that can stand against God's righteousness. The truth. And again, hearing that, things will run through your head like, but what if I catch this thing? Or what if I encounter searing pain of some sort? And I know a lot of people, what's at the base of this is a fear of pain. Well, that's coming. I hate to say it, but it's,
yeah.
We spend so much time trying to prepare ourselves to avoid what's coming and not preparing ourselves for facing it.
Coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of silly, and I say that very lightly because I do take the coronavirus very seriously. I mean, I'm praying that we don't, catch it. My husband he is an essential, and so he is still going out and working and exposing himself and our home, and so I definitely pray over a hedge of protection over my husband. But I say this even knowing, I am still praying against it, but it is silly to worry about it, because if it's not the coronavirus, like we do experience pain in this life, and scripture tells us that more pain will come. It's a spiritual warfare out there, and let's not focus on the coronavirus, so to speak. Let's just focus on that fear that you're talking about. What would my plea, that's what my plea to people would be, is plead, right?
Sure.
Welcome to our home, guys. This is the majority of our conversations. I say words wrong. But yeah, that would be my plea, is to don't make coronavirus, don't worship it. Don't make it your idol right now. I see a lot of people doing that. Be wise to it, see it, know that it's there. Like my husband said earlier, wash your hands, wear your masks, do what you feel like you need to do to keep you and your family safe. But don't worship it. Don't make it your idol. Don't fear it. Fear God right now.
Yeah, which means overcoming your fear of death.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are, it's like it's news to them that if they don't die from the virus, that they were going to live forever. That they have this idea that if it wasn't for this, I would have lived forever. which is,
Yeah.
it's nonsense. And we kind of got to get past that. And it's, not that it's not like it's not a morbid thought. It's just a fact. And the facts are, this is not going away. And if we got at least a year to see the end of just this step of it. And who knows what the devil will bring after that.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. There's a dragon, there's a fire-breathing dragon outside the city gates, and you can't hide from it. You have to get strong enough to fight it, and that we have to slay the dragon. And it's if your dragon is a fear of death, well, I understand that there was a time I was there myself, but you know what you have to do. If you're afraid of dying, for one, you were always going to do that. There was never going to be an avoiding that.
Yeah.
And odds are it would have been something far more painful and drawn out and miserable than the virus. Death is a fact of life. The Catholics have I believe it's a Latin phrase. It's memento mori. Memento mori.
I should probably know that, but I don't.
I don't remember. It basically means remember death. At all times, remember death, because then it can't scare you. It can't if you devote your life to basically dying for Christ, to dying for truth, to not, no matter what, you're not going to live by any lie. You're going to turn away from what you know to be wrong in your heart. The things that you have to convince yourself is true, which is happening so often. You shouldn't need years-long propaganda campaigns if it's true. The truth is written on our hearts. We know what's right and wrong, and we choose after much programming wrong because in the moment it seems easier. It's like facing the lie is so much less abrasive than the truth. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I, we'll spend obnoxious amounts of time talking. We could spend an entire day every day just talking about things, and truth always comes out.
Mm-hmm.
We've faced so many truths just within our relationship that would burn people to the ground. But you can't be afraid. I mean, God is a fire. He's a fire that cleanses, and sets straight. And next week, because I guess we're gonna be doing this every Monday. Next week, I'm gonna be talking about the basically the pagan idols that you are worshiping, and you most likely don't even know it, and to kind of dive into what that is and the difference between the true God and pagan gods, and why that's so closely related to standing up as men of God, why that noble godly masculinity is so closely related to pagan gods. And think about that, meditate on that in the meantime. But I'll be going over that next week. Let's see what else. Yeah, I'm assuming not a lot of husbands, stay-at-home husbands, because we're all turning into
right
that
now,
pretty
we're all
soon.
stay-at-home.
I'm assuming it's mostly women and wives that are listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, and not to mention the women are used to personal purpose shows, so yeah.
Yeah. What was I going to say?
Sorry. Another insight into our home. Chrissy's always interrupting.
She's the interrupter 5000.
He says I tweet all the time that I'm just.
Well, and I have a problem where, like, if a shiny object just goes across me, my entire mind is wiped. It's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I forget everything I was going to say. But what was I saying?
The wives.
Oh, yeah.
Women are.
Okay, so the point of me coming on is to wake up men, because we're needed, and I'll be talking for weeks, going into detail, and hopefully people will see what I'm talking about. But as far as the women that listen to this, it's your responsibility to help wake these men up. And if you're wondering, how do I do that? How do we turn the world right side up again, because it's upside down? It's real simple, and I'll tell you right now, be honest.
Yeah.
Be honest, don't be controlling. That's different things.
Don't nag.
Yeah, let go and let basically let go and let God talk for you. And it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with anger. If there's emotion on your side of it, then you're not doing it right. You're speaking from you're speaking Satan's words. If you have if it's uncontrollable, because Satan likes to do that. I mean, we all know that he comes in and he what's the word? He
Intervene.
possesses.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Satan possesses.
Oh, yeah.
It's much like what emotions do. I know from experience. I've been possessed by anger. I've been possessed by emotion because they had more power over me than I did. And I mean, I'm sure. I mean, everybody can relate to that. Everybody knows that at some point they hit a breaking point and they can't control themselves anymore. A real man of God does not have that breaking point unless God directs him to be angry. In which case, like I said, he's controlling it. It's not controlling him. And so, so women, if you want your man to wake up and stop essentially being the woman of the relationship, the only thing that can do that is the cleansing fire of truth. And that doesn't mean to be mean, although it may feel like that.
Yeah.
And so my advice is if your man's emotional, tell him he's emotional. But you can't also be. You kind of have to be there and just, whatever his reaction is, just watch it like it's a movie. Let him say what he's going to say. It doesn't matter, because you have to remember he can't help it. If he gets angry because you tell him the truth, he cannot help it.
Yeah.
It's the same. You might as well tell him the truth and then act like you're telling somebody who is possessed by a demon. And then you'll see they'll react that way too.
Yeah.
There'll be like a little worm dragon in them that starts writhing when the truth comes across them. It wiggles and it hates it. It recoils. And it's necessary. I mean, fire hurts. It really does.
Yeah, truth hurts. And and also in response to that, when your home starts to get turned right side up, and if your husband is doing a proper job and really following God and leading his wife and leading his home, you will then start to be corrected. but and I bring that up because something that I'm learning is that women also need to be logical.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that my husband lovingly and gently will correct me, in certain areas of my life, because it allows me to then go to God and say, okay, God, what do I need to work out in my heart? What in my life am I needing to work out? And so my husband doesn't do it to hurt me. He does it because he loves me, and he knows that I have it in me to be a good godly woman, and that's what he wants for me as a leader of our home and of our marriage, and being the head. That's what he wants. And so I say that because it is, if you're not used to your husband leading or being somebody that's going to help you grow in your walk or grow as a woman, or godly woman, that is, then you might get your feelings hurt, and it might be a little different. But just remember that's what we all need. We all need truth, and we all need correction, period. And gentle correction, but correction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
The point, the point of that for men and women is to attain peace.
Yes.
And to remember that happiness. Turn on TV for 5 seconds and it's my happiness. It's my truth that leads to happiness. Happiness is a demon.
Mm-hmm.
It's an emotion. You can't hold on to it. It can be a blessing from God if you're happy in the moment. If it's a beautiful day, you have your ice cream and a kite, whatever.
And if you're finding your joy in Him.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, you were saying if it's a happy day and you're eating your ice cream, you
Yeah,
can be a blessing from God.
yeah, it can be.
Sorry.
No, I was saying the point is peace. The point is to if you're uncontrollably happy, you're uncontrollably happy.
Yeah.
It's in the phrase. You have no control over yourself. And when the world is teaching us to seek only happiness, well, you'll find it, and that's the problem. You'll find happiness, and then it's almost like a drug. You have to up the dose. And if what's making you happy is like an ice cream in the moment, well, tomorrow you're going to need a little bit more ice cream.
Yeah.
And ice cream's a gateway drug,
Yeah.
because if all you're trying to get is happiness, then people do the most ridiculous things, and they'll basically blame happiness, and they're not wrong because they're possessed by this urge for happiness. What's so much better is peace,
Mm-hmm.
and to have peace, and these patterns in the Bible, like when you know it's like a tempest, right? A storm, and what Jesus does is calms the storms, and back to speaking to men, what we have to realize is that we are a vessel. We're all vessels, and a vessel is empty until it is filled. And what we need to realize is that we are filled right now, and we're filled with this water of the world, and it's like a tempest in a teapot. We've all heard that phrase. It's like there's this storm of clouds and rain and water inside of a vessel, and those are our emotions. And what Jesus does is calms them to the point where he can walk on them. And blowing wind, it's these raging waves. It's all this language of emotion, right? Uh, you must calm that. You must control that to where you can walk on them. And it sounds great, but how do you do that? How do you overcome your emotion? And the answer is to get to know you. It's to almost sit on the edge of that vessel and watch those waters. And that's prayer. It's kind of it's not it's kind of like a meditative prayer, and it seems like meditation, and as we all know, the devil could take whatever he wants and pervert it. And so a lot of the world is meditating left and right, and they're not letting thoughts come in, and that's how they teach meditation. I fell for that trick for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I would meditate, and it's about blocking every thought that comes in and emptying your vessel. But when you empty it, it just gets filled again, and you don't know what's filling it.
Mm-hmm.
And so pray to when we pray to God, we don't empty the vessel, we simply watch it. We watch the waves, we watch the water, and the idea is to calm the water. And much like, Jesus' first miracle, do you know what that is? What was Jesus' first miracle that he ever did?
He walked on water?
No, but it's related to water. Most of his miracles are related to water, by the way. It's one of these patterns, controlling water.
He made water into wine.
There you go. Yep. Yeah. He made water into wine. And so that's very appropriate for the season, Easter, Passover, when he passed around the cup and said, "This is my blood." Turning that water that fills that vessel, first it's calmed and then turned to the blood of Christ. And, there's that relation also that wine is always blood.
Mm-hmm.
Wine is blood. Well, if the tempest that's in you as a man, all these emotions that you can't get over from your parents, most likely, if you can't calm those, they cannot be turned into wine. They cannot be turned into the blood of Christ. And that was his very first miracle. It was to change water into wine. And that's why, from his first miracle to his last, they involved water and wine. And it's about, God gave authority to man. When man, God created man, he gave authority of the entire planet and its inhabitants to name everything and to have authority over it. And when you have authority, of loving authority, you don't subjugate it. You don't control it for the sake of control, for this weird self-satisfied perversion of control. It's because you want the best. It's why you discipline kids. It's because you want the best. You want a child to be able to contain his emotions and overcome them and become a child of God, to walk with God. That's what that means. It's to let all of that be taken on by Christ, all that emotion. And so, yeah, throughout the weeks we're going to dive into actual applicable techniques to do this, and we're going to be talking about one of the most confusing parables in the Bible is new and old wineskins. A lot of people don't understand what that is, and so I'll be talking about that. One phrase to remember is to with your prayerful meditation is to don't think of it as meditation, but think of it as observation. So you're not being alone with God to empty yourself. You're being alone with God to observe yourself, to know yourself. That way you can know which demons are controlling you, which emotions are controlling you, what worldly things are you aiming at. And that's, we're coming to a place real soon where all these gods, all these false gods of money, of false security, of just all these things we've had, all these gods are going to crumble so fast you won't have any idea what's happening. There's only one God. There's only one thing that's never moving, no matter what's happening outside in the world. And there's going to be a million new gods popping up, and they're going to fall like dominoes. And so, we need to get prepared for that.
Yeah.
And people are going to be going crazy pretty soon.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of that's the thing, just to be rooted in God, Jehovah,
Yes.
Rooted in Him, and allowing His truth to just overwhelm your life and overwhelm your home and your family, and not being afraid of it. I think like the scripture says, wisdom comes from fear of the Lord. So fear not knowing Him, fear not having His grace and His protection and all of those things, and they're there for us, but we have to be aiming and focusing on Him and seeking first the kingdom of God, and really looking at what are we seeking. I mean, I'm not quite ready to talk about it, but Darren and I've had some big time revelations lately in my life about seeking, and at the end of the day, I fear God enough to know and love Him enough to know I want to seek first the kingdom of God and nothing else, not the kingdom of money, not the kingdom of sugar, not the kingdom of whatever it is,
All these things were offered to Jesus
Satan. By Satan himself.
Yeah, that's why next week, and if you're up for it, totally up to you. If you want to tell kind of that story, but that's why next week we're going to dive right into what essentially is all of us Christians worshiping pagan gods, and we had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to that should be pretty interesting. And yeah. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, that was a lot of all I had today. We did come across.
Oh yes.
It's, I don't know, what could you call it? A poem? Limerick?
Yeah, kind of a little. It was a post. It's our favorite farm that we like to get our dairy milk from.
I figured it would just kind of bring a little comfort and to have hope that God does provide. We need to remember God provide. Oh, one thing I did want to also talk about was, I might have to do that next week, I guess. Maybe we have time. It's about suffering and that people will suffer. And I wanted to really tell people about this young man, Alexander Shugol, I think is his name. And he's a Catholic, and we're not Catholic, but I admire people of faith if it's genuine, no matter who they are.
I mean, one of our best friends is a nun, so she's our best friend. So
she's the coolest. But he's a young man that he went into, I think it was St. Peter's Basilica, the main church in the Vatican. I forget what it's called. and he removed the actual literal pagan idols that were placed around the Pachamama statues.
Mm.
If y'all don't know about this, just Google Catholic Pachamama. It's a horrible story.
How do you spell that? Because I wouldn't know how to spell that.
It's just a bunch of Q's and X's.
Okay.
It's Pacha and then MAMA.
And then Mama. Okay.
Yeah, it'll autofill. But if you can, really, if you type in Alexander Pachamama, it should bring it up. But this young man, probably in his late 20s, it seems, he's a very healthy young man and just devoted to truth. And he recorded the whole thing. You can find the video online. He recorded himself going into the Vatican, and him and his friend, they walked around the church, and they removed these wooden idols that the Pope had set up, and they're not. You can't confuse them for anything Christian. They're fertility, they're Mother Earth idols, and they're suckling pigs from the breast. It's like there's no confusing it with anything Christian. And these young brave men, they went in there, they removed them from the church and threw them into the Tiber River. And this young man, he recently had contracted the virus in Vienna, and he tells his story about it, and so I was talking about suffering and how painful. I mean, it is a bad disease. Like, it's painful. It's absolutely going to be painful. If you catch it, it will be painful. And something he talked about dedicating that suffering to a greater cause. Just, kind of Jesus did that. And he tells us to pick up your torture stake, pick up your cross. It's this thing that you will pick up that will torture you, but that you can kind of take on that pain for something bigger. And if we remember that, if we're going through pain and suffering, to dedicate that pain and suffering, to take it on for others, if you will, and pray in it, and meditate in it in the proper way to meditate. And I wanted to bring him up. I'll probably talk about him more down the road too. That he's kind of one of my heroes. But yeah, and this I think we're going to close with, like Chrissy said, it's this kind of poem or limerick from a local farm here, and I liked it because it reminded me of what we can do if we just do it. If people stand up and be children of God, good, honorable men and women of God again, that we'll be okay.
Yeah, and that just to trust God, like He has created nature and this earth so beautifully, that we've just gotten too dependent on things. We've gotten more on things and less on God.
Yeah, we've gotten really dependent on things outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
To where if those get cut down, and we just run in terror. We have no idea what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the ability in us to build it back up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what this poem just kind of brought me some hope. So
I'll help you pronounce the word.
Yes, please do.
But you should read it.
Okay. They ran to the groceries. They filled up their carts. They emptied the tops in Price Chopper and Walmart. They panicked and fought and then panicked some more. Then they rushed to their homes and they locked all the doors. The food will be gone, the milk, eggs, and cheese, the yogurt, the apples, the green beans, and peas. The stores have run out. Now what will we do? They'll be starving and looting and nothing to do. Then they paused and they listened a moment or two. And they did hear a sound rising over the fear. It started out far, then began to grow near. But this sound wasn't sad, nor was it new. The farms were still doing what farms always do. The food was still coming, though they'd emptied the shelves. The farms kept it coming, though they struggled themselves. Though the cities had forgotten from where their food came, the farms made them food every day just the same. Through weather and critics and markets that fall, the farms kept on farming in spite of it all. They farmed without thank yous, they farmed without praise. They farmed on the hottest and coldest of days. They'd bought they'd bought all the food, yet the next day came more, and the people thought of something they hadn't before. Maybe food, they thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe farmers perhaps mean a little bit more. This is
Pereira Pastures.
dairy, big or small. We raise them all. Like all farms, we work 24/7. We're proud to farm. We're here for you. God bless you all.
Yeah, I thought that's most. I love that because it's my dream to run a farm.
Yeah, that's the ultimate dream for the Addis home is to
Yeah,
have a farm.
I know nothing about it, but it's man for years I've just because it makes sense. It's and I was just watching this young man up in I think somewhere in California. He has a quarter acre, and he's efficiency farming. Doesn't use any chemicals. It's all just self-contained. He has chickens, and he's living off of it. On a quarter acre, he provides enough produce and food to live off of. I mean, make money off of. He sells it, and that's a quarter acre. It's like we can do this so easily. We'll all be okay if we just remember who we are.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. I mean, I know that that's one of the things we want to do. Even in our little, condo in a little backyard, we're not going to have a lot of land. But until we have a farm, we're going to have a little mini farm in the city.
Yeah, we're gonna give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I advise other people to start doing that and
Yeah.
to get to know their local farmers.
Yeah. And be thankful.
Yeah,
Thankful for
when it
them.
all comes down to it, and what we're wanting is food and shelter. It's going to be those people that carried on, one of the oldest traditions of just tilling in the thorns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all I got. So yeah, next week,
Yeah.
I haven't thought of a catchy name for it, but it'll be to get to know your pagan idols because you got some. I probably guarantee it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that'll be it. Next
Well,
Monday.
thank you for joining us in If We Do This
Together.
Together. Y'all have a great day. See y'all next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.